Hello again, my brothers and sisters, and welcome to another episode of Off the Beaten Path, the show that looks at paranormal events both throughout history as well as in modern day times. As always, I'm your host, rev.hagen. If you are a DNGNradio.com listener, love having you here. Dungeon Radio, so proud to be a part of that team. I can't even tell you. A lot of really exciting stuff happening on the airwaves there, so please check them out. It's dngnradio.com, The Dungeon. Thank you. We've got a lot to get to today. This was initially going to be a show on the Mothman in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It was a really fascinating case from 1966 to 1968 was the real hotbed of activity during that time. I decided to kind of broaden it. We'll touch on the Mothman, but I decided to kind of broaden the scope of the show a little bit because of this. Mothman Prophecies by John Keel. One of my absolute favorite investigators of all time, mainly because he was a no-nonsense guy and was a boots-on-the-ground guy. When he heard about stuff happening in Mount Pleasant, he went to Mount Pleasant. Spent almost 2 years there on and off investigating this case with Mary Hyde, who worked for the Messenger there in Point Pleasant, which was a newspaper. A fascinating guy. And he didn't just write Mothman Prophecies. Our Haunted Planet, another really good book of his. The Complete Guide to Mysterious Beings by John Keel. He's had a few come out. These are my three favorites. I really thank my buddy Charlie Man, that I used to study with. We've traded books on and off. In fact, a couple of those are probably his, but that's all right. We'll get it back to him, and we give each other books and trade them off back and forth. He's actually the only person I still trade books with because I know I'm going to get them back, and hopefully he knows the same thing. But anywho's, that's why I kind of skipped the main focus being just on John Keel and the Mothman Prophecies, because Mothman, it's one of his definitive works. The movie was really good, but take the movie and put it over here. Read the book. His style of writing is really good, and he's a very famous and very well-respected investigator of the strange and unusual. What I really wanted to talk about, because the more I got into this, the weirder it got, was West Virginia on the whole. West Virginia. It's this crazy place. One of the weird facts about West Virginia, and if you're from West Virginia, I'm not thumping on your state at all. It's a fascinating place. You just have a lot of strange things that happen there. Kind of to start with, there was a guy that did a study, I believe it was in the early 1800s, about the Native American tribes. Well, maybe it was a little later than that. Maybe it was the later 1800s. Anyway, it was about the Native American tribes, right? And where they were in relation to the country. And maps were made of each tribe's territory. The fascinating thing is, the reason I bring this up, is that no Native American tribes settled in West Virginia. Now, right across the Ohio River there were some very famous tribes that had left beautiful burial mounds, a rich trove for archaeologists to study the culture of the indigenous tribes at the time. They did find some stone circles and some stone structures in West Virginia, but no tribe takes credit for them. They're not Native American tribes. No one before Columbus settled in West Virginia, which I found really fascinating. In fact, Tennessee. What's really wild is that in Tennessee, across the river in Tennessee, there was a tribe or the Native Americans knew of this tribe of white people that lived in houses, but they had huge dark eyes, and were sensitive to light. They couldn't go out in the daylight. And the Shawnee tribe ran these guys out of Tennessee. So there is speculation maybe they settled in West Virginia. Maybe that's where we get these stone structures. But just really weird. Really, that's very strange to me. So no tribe, Native Americans wanted to live there. And in modern day, going back as far as, oh God, let's see here. On September 12th in 1952, kids at a school were playing in a playground in Flatwoods reported seeing an object fall from the sky just before nightfall, right? Curious, the boys decided to search for the object. As they topped the hill, they saw the air had a metallic smell, and their eyes began to burn, all right? They saw a burning and hissing object about 100 yards away. It was dark, and one boy turned on a flashlight to explore the scene, okay? The group saw a 10-foot-tall creature with a bright red face wearing green clothing. The boys said the monster's head was shaped like the ace of spades. When the monster appeared to float toward them, the boys ran off in fear to a nearby house and called the police. The police went to the crash site. With the boys, there was an odd smell and skid marks of a large object, and the creature was never seen again, but the craft wasn't there. This is in 1952 in West Virginia. So it was this 10-foot-tall creature that these kids saw. Now, yeah, they're kids, so you kind of take some of that with a grain of salt. But I tend, even in my investigations, to give, and hang on one second, to give credence to children's accounts, if you can interview them alone. Their imaginations can start to get crazy once they start telling their story, and as long as you're not leading the children down the road, in other words, as long as you don't say, so you saw a creature, just instead of saying, so what did you see? Instead of leading the children, you can get some amazing information because they don't know what's supposed to be real and what's not supposed to be real. So as a paranormal investigator, when you're looking at the strange and unusual, excuse me, sorry, I dropped my alien back scratcher there. Oh yeah, carved it myself, alien back scratcher. Anyway, as long as you're not leading the child with the information, you can get some great stuff because, like I said, they haven't formed an idea of what should be real and what shouldn't be real. So as a paranormal investigator, when you're looking into the strange and unusual, to run across a witness with an open mind like that, you usually don't find so much with adults. But you do definitely find it with children. So that was in 1952. There's another really weird case. This guy in the 1800s, right, this farmer, began experimenting, he lived in West Virginia, with embalming techniques, right? Go figure. After perfecting his techniques, he acquired the bodies of two recently deceased women from a West Virginian hospital for the insane. It sounds like something in a horror movie, but apparently this is a real deal. After mummifying the women, they went on display for a while at the Smithsonian, of all places. In the late 1800s, the mummies traveled with the P.T. Barnum Circus. The ownership of the mummies changed hands several times through the years, but now they call the Barber County Museum their home. So you can actually go to the Barber County Museum and check out these mummies. A guy in the 1800s was experimenting with mummification. Freaking amazing. You guys also, in West Virginia, have something called the Roadkill Cook Off. And it's exactly the way it sounds, the Roadkill Cook Off. I'm just going to read a little blurb about it. In West Virginia, it's legal to gather roadkill and use it for several purposes, including as a food supply. When the roadkill law was passed, the residents of Pocahontas County decided to celebrate their new score of food. They had a Roadkill Cook-Off Festival, which became a yearly event. Decades later, this festival is still going and still going strong. I'm going to try to find out the dates on this if you're in the area and you would like to go to the Roadkill Cook-Off in Pocahontas County, West Virginia. Yeah, it's a thing. There's been Chupacabra sightings in West Virginia. Now, for those of you who don't know, and I can't imagine many that would watch this show, a Chupacabra was first brought about in Puerto Rico. It was a supposedly it would suck the blood from goats. They found these goats that were bloodless that had these huge puncture marks in their necks, and they, like I said, they were completely drained of blood. And when they started to see these creatures, they were these hairless, gray, terrifying creatures with fangs, right? Then the Chupacabra legend was born. Now, there's been some really cool footage out of Texas, because this legend now spread to the States and south of the border and the whole 9 yards, right? It's almost become an urban legend of mythic proportions. But they have found there's been this wild footage, and you can find it on YouTube, of these hairless dogs. They almost looks like they have mange or something. But they seem to be a different breed. It's not that they're these diseased animals, but there are these really freaky looking canines. Very skinny, very emaciated. And then there have been some really wild videos that are claimed to have been Chupacabra, but this is all the way in South America, mind you, where they have these creatures. This guy videotaped this creature that he had caught, put it in a cage, and it looked like it was having a horrible time in the cage, just really trying to get out. But he claimed it was a Chupacabra. And I know I'm digressing here all the way to South America, and we're talking about West Virginia, but you guys have Chupacabra sightings. It's absolutely amazing. You also have the snarly yow, said to prowl around Harper's Ferry. A wolf-like creature known as the snarly yowl is supposed to be prowling the mountains surrounding Harper's Ferry. Stories of the snarly yowl date back to the 1700s. Some who claim to have seen the wolf-like beast state that they shot it, but that instead of falling over, the beast only became enraged. The snarly owl has been reportedly seen walking on its hind legs. Eyewitnesses claim it appears out of nowhere and disappears just as easily. So this is almost like a Wolfman Bigfoot. Now everything I've mentioned so far is in the confines of West Virginia. So there's actually quite a few we could do, and we probably will do, an entire show on the snarly owl. There's still sightings to this day. And it's a lot like Bigfoot, where people see it, other than the shooting gig, where people see it, kind of either go for it, or it runs at them and then it disappears. Even with the tracks in the ground, these giant wolf tracks that lead nowhere. It's a really fascinating case in West Virginia. So what have we got so far? We've got the Roadkill Festival. You know, I'm not saying anything, but come on, you guys, that's a little disturbing. The guy who made the mummies, right? You've got the Braxton County monster, those kids that saw the UFO crash and this 10-foot ace-shaped head thing come out. Chupacabras. The snarly yowl. There's been Bigfoot sightings, tons of Bigfoot sightings. The Gathon monster, which is a lot like a Bigfoot. All within this small state of West Virginia. Now, what's funny is maybe it's not funny, I had a roommate in the Army when I was with the 64th Engineer Detachment. We were under First Corps. Not that you need to know any of this. First Corps is the head of the snake for the Pacific Rim. They control the Asian theater, right? So we bunked with First Corps. So I had, my roommate was this guy named Dixon. And God love him, he was a really interesting guy. Everybody warned me, you don't want to room with Crazy Dixon. But I'm sure they said the same thing about me. Oh, don't room with Hagen. I mean, I had Wicca on my dog tags, and I had more conversations about my religion than I've ever had since. But we were kind of the strange roommates, right? Turned out the guy was hilarious. He had been a merchant marine before he had joined the Army. But he was out of West Virginia. And he had amazing stories about his cabin that was way out in the boonies in West Virginia. And also some really amazing stories about serving as a merchant marine and some of the stuff that he saw in his travels, especially at night on the open ocean. When people know that you do paranormal investigations, because I've been doing them for a bit before I joined the Army, everybody's got a story. Now, most people want to tell you their stories. I had to initially pry some of these out of. But he was a big 151 rum drinker. So a couple of drinks and the story started to pour forth. There's also, and like I said, we're going to touch on Point Pleasant. Because from 66 basically to 68, during that 2-year period, so many things happened. It started, what's really interesting here is, according to Wikipedia, just a bastion of decent information, right? It started on November 12th, 1966, with 5 men who were digging a grave at a cemetery near Clinton, West Virginia, and claimed to see a man-like flying figure fly low from the trees over their heads. And they're saying from this is where the Mothman was born. What's really interesting, too, is that Mary Hyre, who worked with John Keel, who was the reporter I mentioned earlier, who worked for The Messenger, which is their newspaper out there, did so much footwork with John Keel and before John Keel showed up. And what's remarkable about it, at least to me, for the time period, that he gave her so much credit for that. He could have just, like a lot of men did back in the day, bowled her over, buried her as a character. As like a side note, well, she helped me out a little bit, but no, she was right there with him during the whole time that he was doing these investigations. Now, one of his first interviews in this whole thing was this gal, Connie Carpenter, right, who was driving home from church. Now, what's interesting about this is in November 1966, right? This is on the 27th, so this is 5 days later, all right, that Ms. Carpenter was driving home from church during the day, okay? At 10:30, when she was driving by this golf course, she saw this 10-foot-tall gray guy. I might be exaggerating here. Hang on one second here. I am exaggerating. He was 7 feet tall. I still have the 10-foot-tall mook from the UFO that the kids saw. So the 7-foot-tall gray man-like creature stand up, and what the feature that she noticed more than anything else were its red glowing eyes. So she, understandably, is very startled by this. She pulls over, and it expands wings out from behind it that are 10 feet in length and goes straight up in the air. Now, there's a few things about this that are interesting. It didn't flap its wings. It went straight up, almost like a helicopter, but with its wings out, right? And the eyes. She got, what is it called? Excuse me. Because there's a condition that leaves people's eyes wonky. And it's conjunctivitis, right? Her eyes became red and swollen after this event for, I think about a week. She still had her red burning eyes that had swollen up. What's fascinating about that is that if you do any kind of UFO research, a lot of people that have seen a craft flying or a low-flying craft get the same condition with UFO. It's almost, but it had been up until this point, and only really with this case, with the Mothman case anyway, that conjunctivitis, that red swelling happened with this creature instead of a UFO, right? So we could really get into the nuts and bolts of the Mothman. I mean, he called himself Ingrid Cold. He started calling one of the witnesses, telling him about disasters that were going to happen. John Keel was contacted in his hotel room by this Ingrid Cold, apparently. When they tried to trace the calls, they couldn't trace them. They didn't know where these calls were coming from. Mary, the gal that worked at the Messenger, her phones were going nuts. People would call her at all times of the day. The phone would go out, it'd come back in, there would be beeping sounds that if we heard today would be suspect, but this is in 66 to 68, right? Where you just have landlines. And where there was still, and I've mentioned this before in other broadcasts, but there was still that trust in the American, in the phone company, in the American government, that these people know what's going on, and they'll be able to take care of it. But they couldn't figure out what was going on with the phones. Mary was contacted by 2 guys. but let me come back to that, because the whole thing in West Virginia and in Point Pleasant ended up with a Silver Bridge collapse, which killed over 100 people. Well, which killed a lot of people, and it was a horrible tragedy that was kind of predicted by Edward Cold. He made other predictions about earthquakes south of the border that had come true, and some that didn't come true. And the guy that he had contacted, Woody, people thought he was kind of a nut. You know, it was another one of those deals, kind of like the pancake guy, the UFO pancake guy, my favorite case, where it kind of ruined this guy's life. Animals were disappearing. Wasn't just the Mothman, though, that was going on. On the Tennessee River, you could set your watch by these UFOs, these unidentified flying objects, these lights that would go down the river, the Ohio River, every night at the same time. And John Keel, Mary both witnesses. People would go out in their lawn chairs and watch this happen. Really prevalent in '67, these lights. There were other creatures roaming around. There were Bigfoot sightings at the time. It was this weird menagerie that descended on Mount Pleasant. Again, like I said, to me, the movie was cool. Don't get me wrong. If I didn't know anything about the case, I'd have loved the movie. If I had never read the book, I would have loved the movie. But I did know something about the case, and I had read the book, and so the movie really got a lot wrong. They got a lot right, but they really got a lot wrong. There was a TNT manufacturing plant from the war that a lot of activity happened. In fact, it was really wild. John Keel had been driving down a road, and to the TNT factory, right? To these mounds, these huge half domes that they used to do it. And he all of a sudden got terrified. And he realized there was an electromagnetic field of some kind that was hitting that part of your brain that when those fields do, you get the fight or flight. But he fought through it and actually marked out the length of this electromagnetic field. And it was like 100 feet or so. It was fascinating. And when he got there, there was something in there, and he wasn't alone. There were 2 or 3 other people with him at the time that was playing cat and mouse with them the whole time, almost like it was playing with them. And they were terrified the whole time. And like I said, a lot of people, over 100 people, witnessed the Mothman specifically between 66 and 68. So really fascinating. But like I said, it's one thing after another in West Virginia. There's also a statue called the Weeping Woman that's in a graveyard, the Riverview Cemetery. And this statue overlooks, General Stonewall Jackson, his tomb. And this statue of this angel weeps, apparently. The Weeping Woman. It's been photographed with her hands resting in different positions as well. This statue apparently moves. It cries. All of this in West Virginia. To me, that is absolutely fascinating. I can't even tell you. So that's kind of it on West Virginia. Like I said, I was going to do this show just on the Mothman Prophecies, because you really could. Because there's so much data out there. But like I said, the definitive work is the Mothman Prophecies. John Keel devoted 2 years of his life to this study, and I give it a lot of credence. A lot of people don't. And honestly, this is just like, even though there's so much documentation and everything else on that particular case, on the Mothman case, finding definitive proof of a lot of this stuff, other than eyewitnesses, and there's 100 of them, just for the Mothman alone in West Virginia. It can be tricky, and it's whether or not you believe these things actually happen. To me, there isn't so much proof. There's so much information out there about the strange and unusual that even to call it paranormal seems a little weird, because it just seems to be a part of our world. The things that we look at as strange. Bigfoot. Geez, that one creature. What was its name? Hang on here. Not the roadkill. The snarly owl. Right? A 10-foot tall wolf. It's not always on its hind feet. Sometimes this is just a massive wolf that cruises around West Virginia that doesn't really have any wolves right now. So it's a really amazing state, but it freaks a lot of people out. I'll be honest with you. I've been to West Virginia. Maine is the only state in the Union I have not been to. I've been to Alaska. I've been to Hawaii. The entire other 49 states. I just have not been to Maine, which is a long story. But West Virginia really freaked me out. I was a kid, and it was really scary. Now, I was born in Kentucky. I was born in Lexington, Kentucky. And I have family in the hills. I have hill people, or part of my family. And there's some weird stuff that happens in the hills of Kentucky and Tennessee too. Don't get me wrong, but the Native Americans were in Kentucky and Tennessee, and they did not go to West Virginia, which I find very fascinating. So I really hope you dug the video. Or this particular show. I really had a good time as always doing it. Hope you learned something. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Try to send the word or spread the word about this a little bit more. I'm going to be doing some really exciting things with DNGN Radio in the future. I'm going to start going to horror cons, the horror conventions, and interviewing some of the actors and directors and some of the really cool special effects guys that go there, and some of the cosplay people that specifically go to horror cons. So that's going to be really fun, and hopefully I'll be able to air some of the stuff here, but definitely on dngnradio.com. Dungeon Radio, absolute blast. Always make sure you check out my son's YouTube channel. He's Prepped Ghost. The link will be down below. And again, like, comment, and subscribe. Leave your comments down below. And if you know of a historical thing that happened, or if something even happened to you, something strange and unusual, you can leave it down in the comments, or you can email me at rev.hagen, Hagen, at gmail.com. rev.hagen@gmail.com. I'll leave it in the comments below, as always. Shout out to Ghost Criers too. Love these guys. We're going to try to do an interview with these guys, maybe go on a case with them in the future sometime. A lot of really good groups out there to follow and do some really, really excellent paranormal investigation. So as always, thanks again for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. I think that's the 4th time I've said that. I think you're getting the message here. And as always, you keep those heads up, my brothers and sisters.